Hi everyone, my name is Shauna in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. In today's video I am going to be talking about the books that I read in May. Unfortunately, May was not a great reading month for me. I read a whopping total of 4 books in the month of May. Now, for a huge chunk of May, I was working on reading a novel in Spanish for my Spanish class, and that took up a lot of time, and there was a lot of assignments with that book on top of like my normal weekly assignments for the class. So I will be talking about that book as a part of this because I consider it as a book that I've read because I've literally read every word from start to finish. I may not have understood everything perfectly because I am not a native Spanish speaker and I'm still learning Spanish, but yeah. So that took up a lot of my time. I could rant about my Spanish class for such a long time. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should do that. Maybe it would be therapeutic. I don't know. I ranted about it to friends and family and stuff a lot. Anyways, let's dig into the 4 books that I read this month. So I was planning on like tackling one of my goals for the year. I was planning on tackling my goal of finishing the Books of Ember series, or the City of Ember series, whatever you want to call it. And I made progress. I didn't finish them, but hopefully I'll be able to finish them in June. So, started off with the second book, The People of Sparks. This is by Jean Duprow. Could be Jean Duprow. I've never really looked into how to say this author's name before. So the City of Ember takes place where there is essentially this city that is underground, and as far as they are aware, they are the last of humanity and they have gone underground to stay safe and to keep themselves safe. They don't really know why. They've been there for hundreds of years and the city is failing them. They have to find a way out, but there is people in that city who don't want to even explore finding a way out. So it's a really interesting take on things. It's a really interesting idea to bring to the dystopian genre. It was one of the first dystopian books that I've ever read. It is one of the books that got me into this genre. I got into this genre literally over 10 years ago. Isn't that wild to think about? But anyways, finally continuing on with the series, and I feel like if I'd read this one as the second book in the dystopian genre that I'd ever read, maybe it would have been good. But as someone who has now read tons of dystopian books, this one's nothing special. I can't cover in detail too much about what this book is about, but it does take off directly after the cliffhanger that occurs in The City of Ember. My problem with this book is that it brings nothing original to the dystopian genre. It is essentially covering 2 factions or 2 groups of people struggling for resources and the disasters that occur as a result of that. This is something that we see time and time again in dozens of dystopian books and in survival books. It's nothing new. This brought nothing new to the genre. It is also very generic reasoning that you get behind why things are the way they are in this world, because you do get some answers that you don't get in book 1, but it is so generic and never gives you specific details. It's also really slow paced compared to The City of Ember. Like, it's really boring. I was just trying to get through this as quickly as possible because I was so bored. There's also a character named Torin who's introduced in here. He is literally my least favorite character that I've read about this year. I cannot stand him. He is so annoying. He is so annoying. Oh my gosh. The kid is a literal child terrorist. Like, instead of being like, oh, I'm so angry, he's like, oh, I'm so angry, I want to bomb these kids. Like, that's legitimately something that goes through his brain as he's thinking about how much he dislikes someone else. And there's no reasoning, no solid reasoning why he dislikes the other person, which is like, it's something that happens with kids. But also I was like, I am so like sick of this. Like, oh, just stop. Like, it was pissing me off. So I ended up giving this one 2 out of 5 stars. It's not like the worst dystopian book that I've ever read, but I really don't like it, and I don't think it brings anything new to the genre. I think as a sequel to The City of Ember, it's really disappointing. And then I read volume 11 of a series that all of you have been hearing me complain about. Yeah, you've been hearing me complain about it for months if you have been watching my videos for a while, and that is Death Note. I read volume 11, which is called Kindred Spirits. It's by Sugumi Oba. I was looking to the side to see the author's name. So the series, in case you haven't heard me talk about it, and in case you don't know anything about it, because I know it is a very hyped series, it starts off with there's this boy who gets a death note, and with a death note, anybody's name who you write in the death note will die, and if you write a specific way that you want them to die, they will die in that way. and then a investigator starts investigating the situation. The thing about this series is at a certain point it just starts repeating the same things over and over again as they're trying to solve the mystery. They're going through the same thought processes, the same investigation techniques, the same cycles over and over and over again. So essentially the past, like, I feel like 8 volumes have been repeating stuff over and over and over again, and there isn't like that many new things that are added to the series. The thing that is getting me through these volumes at this point is the fact that I'm almost done with this series. I have a single volume left. Now there is like some like companion book, you know how there's like guidebooks that go along with it. I am aware that Death Note has one of those. It's not on the Shonen Jump app, so I'm not gonna go invest money into finding it. Unfortunately, what I'm discovering too about reading on Shonen Jump is that my brain has this thing that occurs that's happening when I read online through an app like Shonen Jump, where it's like if I'm watching, say, a show on Netflix, I have to finish it because it will be on my continue watching, and every time I open that application it will say continue watching, like say continue watching Umbrella Academy. It will always be there. And I'm discovering that this is happening with Shonen Jump, where I open the app and I'm like, I'm gonna start a new manga, it's gonna be so good, and then I'm like, oh no, it says continue reading. And then I just have to keep reading. So unfortunately, there's like another series that I'm reading where I'm sort of bored of it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to finish that series, aren't I? Even though I'm not very far into it, I'm like, I'm probably gonna have to finish that series because of the way my brain is working. It might be an OCD thing, I'm not 100% sure. I've never really talked about it in therapy. Maybe that's something I should bring up too. But yeah, I gave volume 11 2 out of 5 stars. Like, I'm just ready for it to be over. I'm so ready for this final confrontation, and I really hope the final confrontation is at least entertaining, and I really hope that it ends in a satisfying way. However, I have seen one spoiler in regards to Misa that does not seem satisfying to me with the way that her story arc is resolved, but maybe it's gonna happen differently than the spoiler that I've seen, because I saw a clip, and I'm hoping that it's different than the clip made it seem. Then I read book 3 of the Books of Ember series. Book 3 is not a sequel, it's a prequel, so my thoughts on this are actually different than you may expect given what I thought of book 2. Oh my god. Oh my god. If you want to read this one, do not read that Goodreads description, because I just saw that the Goodreads description spoils the ending of the book. Like literally on the first sentence. What? More on that in a little bit. So basically, when this book takes place, the United States is basically turning into a mess, and Nikki is this young girl who lives in a city that is going drastically downhill, and she doesn't feel very safe there. It's not a safe or healthy environment for a young girl to be growing up. Her great-grandfather dies, and she sees this as the opportunity to go to his house to help get the house ready to be sold, and to convince her aunt to actually not sell the house so that she can keep the house and live in the city, because she wants to get out of her city. She also has some other life goals that she sets for herself, and this is her journey of trying to achieve those life goals, given that she doesn't really like the life that she was living in the city that she lived in. However, she gets to this town and there is a prophet, hence the title, The Prophet of Yonwood. She gets to Yonwood, there's this prophet. She is this woman who is said to have had a vision and now gets visions, and she mumbles words, and there's a group of people who interpret her words and what they mean, and with each new thing it implements new rules for the towns. The rules don't always make a lot of sense. Some of them do, some of them don't. And there's this question of whether you're morally obligated to do what is right if you believe that, like, God tells you this. And there's also this idea in this book that I find fascinating, is the most fascinating part of this book for me, and that is, it's not really like a new idea to the genre, it's just something that I like exploring, and I liked how it was explored in here, which is the idea of when you see that the world is getting into a very dire state and maybe reaching the end of the world, people will latch on to religion and cults and cult-like figures. And this book explores that, but it also explores it in like a child way, because this book is meant for children. So it's in a way that like children can digest the subject and understand the subject. And like the hard thing is, you have to understand that like when people are going through hard times, like they will latch on to things like cults, where people like us may be like, oh, like this is horrible, but to people who are experiencing extreme hardships and potentially ends of the world, like it makes sense in their brains to do cults, if that makes any sense. It makes sense to me as someone who's really read a lot of end of the world books. The problem though about the cult element is here is that with cults, people do really horrible, gross things. I always need someone that I can root for when there's cults in books, and there wasn't really anyone that I liked and felt like I could root for in here, which hindered from my enjoyment of the story quite a bit. However, there were some other things I liked about this book. I really liked the pacing of this one. I thought that the pacing went fairly well. I also really liked the house, the great-grandfather's house. It felt like a character by itself. Like, it was so rich and fascinating to explore, and it, like, if I were to view it as a character, I suppose there would be one character that I actually was interested in this story. And there is a lot of mysteries posed by this house. You don't get the answers to all of them, which is a little frustrating because I don't think you're gonna get the answers to all of them in the next book because of the amount of time that takes place between this book and the other books in the Books of Ember series. Here's a huge caveat I have about this book though. This book works really well as a standalone. It is an interesting standalone. It sucks as something that is connected to another book in the series because this isn't really an additional installment in the series. There is literally 2 or 3 pages at the end of the book that connects this book to the Books of Ember. Nothing else whatsoever in this book connects to the Books of Ember. So I think it is a terrible prequel or sequel, depending on how you view it, because it is labeled as the 3rd book, but it is technically a prequel. I think it is a terrible prequel or sequel, but if you view it as a standalone that stands on its own, it's fairly decent. So because of that, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I'm doing my rating more so as if this were a standalone because I did legitimately enjoy this book and find it interesting. I just think it should have been separated from the Books of Ember series, or it should have been revised to be more heavily connected to the Books of Ember series. Also, those last 3 pages are what I'm talking about that is spoiled on the Goodreads synopsis of this book. So if you want the connection spoiled, Goodreads has it for you. If you don't want it spoiled, don't read the Goodreads synopsis, I guess. And now on to the final book that I read this month, which I am not giving a star rating to because it is the first novel that I've fully read in Spanish. I've read short stories and I've read picture books in Spanish a lot because when I was in middle school and high school, my Spanish teacher believed that the best way for students to learn Spanish was to read picture books and short stories. So I read dozens of those, probably upwards of 100 of those, if not more, because literally like each class I would go in and we would have a new short story or picture book to read. This is the first time I've read an actual novel. And I feel like with the amount of assignments that were involved in this novel and the amount of knowledge that was required for this novel that I didn't have, I felt like my life was being sapped from me for a while. Like it felt like I lived and breathed this book for a while and there was nothing more to me for a good section of time, which was really frustrating, but I got through it. I'm almost done with Spanish. My last assignment is due June 10th, but technically I have the capabilities to complete every assignment now. Like tomorrow, the day after that I'm filming this video, I might try and see if I can just crack out as much as I can of the final assignments that I have left to do. Oh my gosh, wait, why does this book say it's part of a series? Oh. This is a 4-book series. That is news to me. The book that I had to read for my Spanish class was Cajas de Cartón. This is by Francisco Jimenez. Cajas de Cartón, Cajas de Cartón translates to cardboard boxes, but if you look at the English version of this book, it is called The Circuit. So that's the name that most of you would probably have heard as opposed to Cajas de Cartón. This book is a semi-autobiographical book, so it's like inspired by the author's own life, and some of the stories and the characters heavily are influenced or are directly pulled from the author's own life. And this book follows this boy and his family, and they are undocumented immigrants in America, and it follows their experiences. And I think that because it follows their experiences and because you see so deeply how these immigrants feel and why they do what they do, I think it has the potential to change some people's minds about immigration. It was mostly eye-opening for me. I would say that there are some books that I've read who have covered these topics really well, but I think what was new to me about this was from the perspective of a child, and as opposed to, I believe the one that I read that had the biggest influence on me regarding immigration was one where it follows a young adult who is 18 or 19. So that's a huge thing that it brought to the forefront for me. So I think it's a really important book, and I think it shares a lot of great experiences and stories. I think if you are reading this as your first novel in Spanish, it will be really hard to get through. I would argue that my professor should have chosen a different book for this class because I felt like there was a lot that I didn't have the knowledge to understand. So I had to use a lot of online dictionaries to help with understanding a lot of things in the story. Verb forms and stuff, I mostly was able to get really well because that's what my classes focused on a lot. It was more nouns and new verbs that were hard for me, more so nouns because I feel like most of the verbs at least had a basic understanding of what they were or what they could be, but a lot of the nouns I was like, I have no clue. Like, honestly, I have no knowledge that could help me with this. So yeah, it was like a frustrating experience, but I also feel like it was rewarding because I feel accomplished for having read this book and for mostly understanding it. I also feel like it was rewarding because it was so eye-opening about the experiences of immigration, specifically from the point of view of a child. I would say if you are interested in reading books about immigration, this is definitely one that you should consider reading, specifically in English if you're a native English speaker, unless you're trying to learn Spanish. For context, I am currently wrapping up the final course in a 2-year Spanish segment. I'm not going to be continuing after second year Spanish in college, but also college Spanish, and saying that I'm finishing year 2 doesn't translate over to high school Spanish because I learned more in 2 years of Spanish in college than what I learned in high school. But it also had to do with like the teaching styles of my college professors versus my high school and middle school teachers. Yeah, that was really my thoughts on Cajas de Cartón. As I said, I'm not rating it. I think if I had like read it in English, I would have rated it, but like I'm not gonna rate it since I didn't read it in English. But yeah, those were generally my thoughts on it. So those were the 4 books I read this month. I'm hoping to read a lot more in June. I'm hoping that June is a better month for me, like in general. I think it should be, but also it's really hard to tell. I have some fun things planned for June. I'm going to Pride in one of the cities. There's like 3 Prides that I was going to hit up this year, but I think I might actually only hit up 1, which I'm going to hit up in June. The other 2 aren't even in June, so I might still hit them up. I have a California trip planned for June, which I am very excited about, and like I have been hyperfixating on this game called Love in Deep Space, and I am planning on cosplaying from it a decent amount in June, so I'm hoping that June will be fun. I have some fun things planned. I'm gonna be done with Spanish, which will be so freeing, but also I have to take a summer class this year, so I am taking an English course, but it's approaches to grammar, which like, ugh, it's not like an English course where I'm like reading books and discussing books and like analyzing books. It's like a focus on grammar, and I'm like, oh no, this could be really rough or it could be decent because generally I find English classes to be fairly enjoyable. Anyways, enough for me rambling. I should probably go to bed. It's 3:15 in the morning. But also because of dissociating, I have been going to bed at 7 a.m. a lot, which is not good. So this is going to be going to bed early for me for this week. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. All of my other social media will be linked down in the description below. In terms of my book related social media, I also have a Bookstagram and a BookTok. I don't know honestly if TikTok will last through the month of June, but you can follow me for however long it's there. I know that the next like deadline for the TikTok ban is, I want to say June 15th. It's one of those days. It could be June 15th or it could be like, I think it's one of the teens. Like it could be like the 18th, it could be the 17th, but I'm pretty sure it's the 15th. But yeah, who knows what'll happen with that. But I hope all of you had a great reading month in May, and I will see all of you in my next video. Until next time, goodbye.